Running out of gas on a desolate stretch of road is the kind of thing you'd expect to happen in a B-grade horror movie, not in real life. This happened back in the summer of '86, and there I was, engine sputtering to a stop just a stone's throw away from a rundown farmhouse that seemed like it had seen better days. My only choice was to walk up to it and see if someone could help. As I approached the farmhouse, the worn-out paint on the clapboard walls peeled away, revealing the history etched into the wood. I knocked on the door, feeling a bit uneasy. My gaze shifted to the flickering porch light, creating eerie shadows that danced in the dimming sunlight. The door swung open, revealing a portly man with a beaming smile that seemed almost too friendly. He wore overalls that looked like they'd seen more seasons than a farmer's almanac. "Well, howdy there, stranger," he exclaimed in a voice that echoed a bit too much enthusiasm. "What can we do you for?" I explained my situation, hoping they had a gas can or a working phone. The man's eyes sparkled as if he'd been waiting for a lost soul like me to wander into his doorstep. "Well, shoot. You're in luck. We got a gas can in the shed out back. Name's Jed, by the way. This here's the Anderson homestead." Relieved, I followed Jed around the house to the shed. The setting sun cast elongated shadows, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the farmhouse held more secrets than it let on. As we reached the shed, the door let out a rusty screech, and a peculiar scent wafted out, musty like the remnants of old secrets. Inside, Jed handed me the gas can. "You know, you're the first visitor we've had in a mighty long while. Folks don't usually come round these parts." I forced a laugh, chalking it up to rural isolation. As I filled the gas can, Jed continued with his unnerving cheerfulness. "Why don't you join us for supper? Ma's cooking up a feast and we'd be mighty glad for the company." Politely declining, I thanked him for the gas and made my way back to the car. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a canvas of darkened fields and a sky scattered with stars. But as I approached the car, the feeling that I was being watched crawled up my spine. Curiosity nipped at my heels like a persistent dog, and against my better judgment, I decided to accept Jed's offer. They seemed friendly, albeit a bit odd, and it was better than spending the night alone on a deserted road. Back at the farmhouse, the aroma of home-cooked food wafted through the air, drawing me into the warmth of the flickering kitchen light. The Andersons welcomed me with open arms, their enthusiasm bordering on unsettling. The family consisted of Jed, his wife Martha, and 2 children, a boy and a girl, who eyed me with an unsettling intensity. The dinner table groaned under the weight of the feast. Peculiar dishes, some with names I couldn't pronounce, filled the room with a medley of scents. Jed and Martha delighted me with tales of the farm, their laughter taking on a strange cadence. The children, expressionless as porcelain dolls, stared without blinking. Unsettled, I tried to shift the conversation, asking about the farmhouse's history. Martha's eyes glazed over as she recounted tales of the land, but something in her voice hinted at a deeper undercurrent. After dinner, Jed insisted I stay the night, assuring me they had a guest room. Reluctantly agreeing, I felt a chill as he led me up a creaky staircase to a room that seemed to belong to another era. The faded wallpaper whispered untold stories, and the air clung to the room like a forgotten memory. As I lay in bed, the dim light casting elongated shadows across the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had walked into a trap. The Andersons' friendliness felt suffocating, a facade hiding something sinister. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but reason argued that my paranoia was getting the best of me. In the dead of night, an eerie silence hung over the farmhouse. Unable to shake the sense of impending doom, I decided to investigate. As I crept down the hallway, the floorboards protested beneath my weight. A soft glow emanated from under a door, drawing me like a moth to flame. As I pushed it open, I stumbled upon a scene that was ultra-disturbing. The Andersons gathered in a dimly lit room, surrounded an ancient-looking book, their eyes glazed with fervor. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had walked into a ritual, a macabre dance with forces beyond my understanding. Fear rooted me to the spot as Jed turned, his eyes devoid of the friendliness I had encountered earlier. "You weren't supposed to see this, stranger," he hissed, the warmth in his voice replaced by a sinister growl. My heart pounded in my chest as the family advanced, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly malevolence. I turned and fled down the darkened hallway, the farmhouse's secrets awakening like specters in the night. Reaching the front door, I fumbled with the lock, my breath hitching at every creak in the silence. The night seemed to stretch endlessly as I sprinted across the fields, the farmhouse shrinking in the distance. The distant glow of my car offered a lifeline, and I sprinted towards it, fueled by a cocktail of fear and adrenaline. With the engine roaring to life, I sped away from that forsaken farmhouse, leaving behind a family whose friendliness bordered on the macabre. As I drove into the night, the image of those unsettling eyes lingered in my rearview mirror. The farmhouse, a mere silhouette in the distance, stood as a reminder that sometimes the offer of help can be more terrifying than the predicament that led you to seek it. The old lawyer's letter arrived on a gloomy Tuesday. It was a peculiar piece of mail, the kind that flips your day on its head. Turns out, I had a distant relative who had kicked the bucket, leaving behind a dilapidated farmhouse and the odd assortment of possessions he'd managed to collect over the years. He was my great-uncle, and his name was Albert. I barely knew the guy, and the last time I saw him was at a family reunion when I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Yet there I was, the lucky heir to a run-down farmhouse somewhere in the boonies. To say I was thrilled would be a blatant lie, but hey, free property is free property, right? So with nothing to lose and a weird sense of obligation, I packed my bags and headed to the middle of nowhere. The GPS seemed just as clueless as I was about the farmhouse's location. My journey involved a dusty road, a rickety bridge, and a couple of wrong turns before I stumbled upon the place. The farmhouse looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since the invention of color television. Its weathered boards creaked in the wind, and the porch sagged like a tired old man's back. A more optimistic person might have seen potential, but I just saw a whole lot of work. My first order of business was to open the creaky door and let in some light. As I stepped inside, the stale air hit me like a forgotten punchline. The place smelled like dust and solitude, and every creak of the floorboards seemed to echo the loneliness of the past. The rooms were filled with the eclectic remnants of Uncle Albert's existence. An ancient radio sat on a rickety table, crackling to life with static when I accidentally bumped into it. Dust-covered furniture was draped in faded sheets, and cobwebs clung desperately to forgotten corners. The kitchen, or what was left of it, harbored a few rusty pots and pans, as if cooking had been an afterthought for Uncle Albert. A small dining table sat in the corner, adorned with a single lonely chair. My initial excitement dwindled as I realized the immense task at hand. Cleaning and renovating this place would require more than a weekend warrior's resolve. But the more I poked around, the more I got this nagging feeling that I wasn't alone. Late one night, as I toiled away in the kitchen, the soft creak of a floorboard caught my attention. I shrugged it off at first, attributing it to the natural settling of an old farmhouse. But then came the faint sound of a door creaking open. That's when the hair on my neck decided to stand at attention. I cautiously followed the sounds, my flashlight flickering with every hesitant step. The farmhouse seemed to groan in protest, as if hiding secrets in the shadows. The creaking led me to a narrow hallway where a door stood slightly ajar. With a hesitant push, I swung the door open. The room inside was dimly lit, the windows draped in heavy curtains that let in only slivers of moonlight. And there, sitting in the corner, was an old rocking chair, gently swaying as if keeping time with some invisible melody. For a moment I froze. Then, dismissing my apprehension, I walked toward the chair. The air grew thicker with each step, and the shadows seemed to dance in rhythm with the rocking. As I reached out to touch the chair, it abruptly stopped. My heart pounded in my chest as the realization sank in. Someone else was in the farmhouse. I panicked and stumbled backward, bumping into a dusty wardrobe. It groaned in protest, and the room fell silent. The minutes that followed felt like an eternity. Every creak, every gust of wind outside seemed like a prelude to something far more sinister. I clutched the flashlight, scanning the room for any sign of movement. With a newfound urgency, I decided to cut my losses. I fled the room, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. The farmhouse felt colder, more hostile, as if the very walls were watching my escape. As I slammed the front door shut behind me, I hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the desolate farmhouse. The letter had promised a simple inheritance, but what I got was a rundown nightmare steeped in unsettling whispers. I never did find out who, or what, shared that farmhouse with me that night. And Uncle Albert's legacy, instead of a quaint rural retreat, turned out to be a haunting chapter in my life, forever etched in the dilapidated walls of a farmhouse that time forgot. So me and my wife Sarah decided to take a leap into the country life. We found this farmhouse a real fixer-upper, but it had potential, you know. Rolling fields, big porch, the whole package. We were excited to start this new chapter. The place had character, that's for sure. Creaky floorboards, peeling wallpaper, a real fixer-upper, like I said. We spent weeks patching things up, adding a fresh coat of paint, making it ours. The folks in town warned us about the old farmhouse, said it had a history, but we ain't superstitious. It's just an old place, right? The first night, we had dinner on the porch, watching the sun set over the fields. The air was crisp, and the scent of wildflowers hung in the breeze. We felt like we'd struck gold. Unfortunately for us, the shadows of the fields held more than we bargained for. A few days in, strange things started happening. We'd hear footsteps in the hall when we knew we were alone. At night, the floorboards creaked like someone pacing back and forth. I blamed it on the old wood settling in, but Sarah, well, she had her doubts. One evening, after dinner, we sat in the living room, feeling the weight of the day. The fireplace crackled, casting flickering shadows on the walls. That's when we heard it. A soft whisper, like someone speaking just out of earshot. We glanced at each other, eyebrows raised. The whispering continued, barely audible but unmistakable. We searched the farmhouse room by room, but the whispers seemed to dance just ahead of us. It was like the walls held secrets we couldn't uncover. Nights got weirder. The fields, once bathed in moonlight, now seemed to harbor a darkness that clung to the air. Sarah started seeing shadows outside, moving like someone was out there watching us. I told her it was probably just trees casting shadows, but even I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. One night, as we lay in bed, the whispers returned. Sarah sat up, eyes wide, and pointed to the window. She said she saw someone, a silhouette standing in the moonlight. I squinted, trying to make sense of the shadows, but by the time I reached the window, there was no one there. We blamed it on stress, lack of sleep, but the unease lingered. The fields outside felt like they held more secrets than we could fathom. Sarah insisted we ask the neighbors about the farmhouse's history, hoping to put our minds at ease. So, during our next trip into town, we did just that. Turns out the farmhouse had a dark past. A couple who lived here years ago disappeared without a trace. Some folks said they left in the dead of night. Others whispered about foul play. The truth was lost in the gossip of a small town. As days turned into weeks, we tried to shake off the unease, but the shadows persisted. Objects moved on their own, and some nights I swear I heard soft laughter echoing through the hallways. Sarah became fixated on the history, convinced the farmhouse held on to the couple's lost spirits. We decided to invite a local historian to dig into the farmhouse's past. The guy spent hours flipping through dusty records, tracing the land's ownership, and uncovering old stories. When he left, he had a look on his face, part disbelief, part concern. He told us the couple who disappeared had an eerie connection to the fields. They believed the land held some kind of ancient power, something beyond understanding. Their disappearance, he said, was never solved, and the farmhouse had changed hands countless times since. The shadows seemed to grow darker after that revelation. Sarah started having nightmares, vivid dreams of faces in the fields, of voices calling out from the darkness. We began to question if the farmhouse was haunted by something more than just memories. One evening we stood on the porch, gazing at the fields that once seemed full of promise. The air hung heavy with the weight of the past. As the sun set, shadows stretched across the landscape, and for a moment, I saw them, faces in the fields, staring back at us. We decided it was time to leave. The farmhouse, with its creaky floorboards and mysterious whispers, became too much for us to bear. As we drove away, I glanced back at the fading silhouette of the old place. The fields whispered their secrets, and though we never fully understood, we knew one thing for certain: some stories are better left untold. Thanks for watching. Don't miss out on more spine-chilling tales. Subscribe now for weekly scares. Hit that red button and join our journey into the unknown.